Okay.
Super, thank you.
Okay. Go on.
So the title perhaps doesn't reflect the invite, but it's very similar. I gave a presentation at King's College in London on something similar, and I decided that it would be useful to use a similar presentation and augment that with some updated material. So that's come off the screen at it. I don't know if you can see it yourself or.
Dr. Murray.
Yes.
Okay. Would you like me to move on?
Yeah, well, I can't see the slide at the moment. The slide seems to have come off the screen. So let me come out of my presentation. I don't see this presentation on this on the screen
really?
at the moment.
Okay. Let me try it again.
It was there. It's there now.
Is it okay now?
That's the front page. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, and I'm sometimes a bit humorous with students, and I often use pictures that civil engineers that are quite old. So this chap's about 200 years old. Thomas Telford, one of the first civil engineers, and of course some of the students expect a picture of me to be on that. So it's just really a way of making the students feel a bit more comfortable, perhaps at the start of a lecture or a presentation. So if we move forward, please, at it. Yes. So this is the paper, of course, that ATIT may have been referring to or spotted an earlier version of this. And I'm very happy that it was published, I think, yesterday in the ICA proceedings. So this is obviously a paper that's specific to civil engineers. And we have about 450 undergraduate civil engineers studying for BEng, MEng civil engineering. And we have a large cohort of postgraduate civil engineers at MSc level, mostly international students. These students tend not to take these initiatives, but on occasions, on a Monday evening, if I have space, I'll invite some of the MSc students along. And we've been very successful recently in securing employment for 3 or 4 students from India who were guest students with us studying MSc civils, and they've secured jobs in Scotland. So they're very happy, in fact. So occasionally I can invite some of the MSc students along, but on the whole, both these initiatives are for undergraduate students who tend to come to us straight from school at 18 and between 18 and 22 undertake 4 or 5 years of study. So that paper is available. I think ATIT has distributed the author's copy of that, which isn't as streamlined, of course, as the journal paper, but nonetheless, you have all the information from that. So let's move forward, please, ATIT. Now, I wanted to speak briefly about something I do, given it's an international audience, and I did mention I'm very pleased to have international students with me at Strathclyde. And something that I do is I ask an international student to help the students from Glasgow learn about a foreign country. Really, it's about the student speaking to the international student about culture and customs in their country. And then I ask the students to do some sketching of buildings and structures within that home country. And the students get a bit fixated on the poster because that's the thing that's actually graded and marked. But really what I'm trying to do is make sure that the students from Glasgow understand it's a global industry and it's a global economy, and that, we're never far away from other countries. So it's usually quite a surprise for a student from Glasgow who's 18, perhaps, to meet somebody from India or Vietnam, or Singapore, perhaps, or Myanmar, and to say, oh my goodness, life's different there, So that's something I've done for the last 10 or 12 years. It's not related to the work integrated learning, but I thought it would be interesting enough to show you this, because normally when we have international students and I ask them to help, they're very, very keen to do that and very proud to talk about their home country. So that's an initiative that works very well, and I think could work well with any discipline in higher education. Okay, let's move on, please. So one of the reasons we get industry involved in the course is we have to have accredited, and in about 2 weeks' time, in fact, every 5 years we have a body who come to look at our course, our programs, to see that we are doing things in accordance with the Engineering Council. The Engineering Council are an umbrella body that kind of control not so much the syllabus, but certainly have an overarching view of what should be in engineering programs, be it mechanical, civils, electrical, biomedical. And we then have a separate body under this umbrella called the Joint Board of Moderators, and that's made up of industry people and of academics, and they come to us every 5 years to check the programme is in accordance with the requirements. So they'll be visiting us quite soon, in about 3 weeks' time, and they will in fact be looking at these initiatives, hopefully, and one assumes be quite happy that they're doing the job, maintaining a strong, viable, visible link with civil engineering profession. A lot of my colleagues who are researchers tend not to do this very often, and I think it's a bit because they're a bit fearful. They've perhaps come up into higher education, past a degree, past a PhD study, they get a job as a researcher, then perhaps a postdoc, and then they become a lecturer, perhaps a professor eventually. And because they haven't been in industry, they may be a bit fearful about contacting industry, but in many ways, picking up the phone, dropping an email can always work, So I think contacting industry to start with, to begin these initiatives, is always helpful in a piecemeal fashion. And then gradually industry start to see you're supporting them, they're supporting us, and the relationship starts to build. And in general, the relationship tends to be quite personal. You know these people by first name, you meet them occasionally, and you grow up this personal relationship with these industrial contacts. And I think that's something that's I value and they value. There's no monetary, there's no financial gain to either of these things. It's a win-win initiative for everybody. Okay, so the background to this is we have to comply with the program there that tells us to contact industry. Okay, move on, please. Now, one of the great challenges at the moment, and I'm sure it's very similar in your part of the world as it is here, and we've seen some recent floods in Spain, some tremendous, very bad floods, but nothing compared to other parts of the world. One of the things that the industrial board, who are part of the Joint Board of Moderators, ask us to do, again, this is kind of separate from the main talk, but I thought it was relevant, given we're talking about international aspects, is the sustainable United Nations sustainability goals, and to make sure that we're addressing the climate change or the climate emergency. I'm not sure that the group who come next week are going to see an awful lot of that in the course. Our students are certainly aware of sustainability and some of the issues around the world, from the climate. But it's a challenge, and I think we can see that in the COP29 that's going on at the moment in the news, that having coal and burning coal and having gas and burning gas are things that some countries don't want to do, and other countries do want to do. So addressing the climate emergency is going to be one of these things that I tell the students they'll have to have for the next 50 odd years in their life. So it's perhaps an overarching issue to deal with. And you can see how perhaps that links back to the international posters, meeting students from different parts of the world who have a different perspective on climate emergency, perhaps very much more urgent than it is in Scotland or England, So just a bit of background there. Let's move on, please. So if we just give a couple of clicks there, please, at it, that'll bring up the whole slide.
What did you say?
I've got a couple of additions that come into that. So if you click on those, it'll bring those up, I think.
Oh, okay.
As if you're moving slide, yeah. Yeah, that's the full slide there, yes. Okay, so one of the backgrounds to higher education in the United Kingdom is that we have a lot of researchers, and universities in the UK, as I suspect around the world, have become businesses, and lots of the income that comes into university comes through research funding. And this has had quite an impact on the way that academic staff are hired and employed, and therefore their motivation to perhaps work with industry to help students. And what I was doing, he was contrasting one of the first professors in civil engineering at Glasgow University, along the road from us, quite frankly, who had industrial knowledge, who worked in industry and became a professor, and in fact a great researcher back in the 1850s, 1860s. And I was contrasting that with one of the recent presidents of the Institute of Civil Engineers, Ed McCann, who in fact was a visiting professor at us and who works in industry. But in between this, in the 1980s, in the UK, universities in the UK were subject to research grants and research income, which depended on mostly employing PhD employees to undertake research. And overall, these kind of staff were less interested in undertaking work integrated learning with students. They were less interested on mostly, there are exceptions, mostly with working with students to contact industry. And this has led over the last 30 years to a shortage of people working with industry from academia in engineering. We're addressing that issue now with employment of teaching fellows who tend to have industrial practice. But over the last 30 odd years, we've had too few engineers working with industry to help the students, working with industry to do research, but too few perhaps working with industry to help the students. As I say, there are exceptions, some very good exceptions. Okay, let's move on. The other background to why we have students thinking about employability, the term employability seems to take on a different kind of a different body depending which paper you read, which report you read. But certainly the concept of employability in higher education seems to be worldwide, and I see it particularly in Australia with their engineering students. The idea that we teach a body of knowledge, whether it be engineering, geography, history, science, mathematics, we teach the body of knowledge to the students, but we also give them these skills and attributes that allow them to be employable by industry, by employers. So the Deering report in the United Kingdom from 1997 is quite significant in encouraging universities to engage in employability initiatives. So this is seen by most researchers who look at this topic as being the start of that by 1997. It's quite peculiar because if we go back even to the early 20th century, universities had what we call sandwich courses. And these were courses where the students went out during the summertime and worked with industry for 10, 12, 15 weeks. And we had a great selection of these sandwich courses in most universities in the UK during the 1960s, 70s and 80s. So in a way, it's quite peculiar that by 1997, we're saying we need more of these things happening. Employers to work with their students, universities to approach employers and companies to work with the students in higher education and be familiar with work experience. So one of the great things we have here in my course at Strathclyde is we have lots of opportunities for graduate jobs, but we have fewer opportunities for students to work in industry during the summer. They do work in supermarkets, they work in clubs and pubs and restaurants, but we have fewer opportunities for them to work in industry. So that's an issue at hand. Okay, let's move on, please. So the Royal Academy of Engineering is a body that oversees education and research within the UK, if not worldwide. We were lucky enough to have our Vice Chancellor, Sir Jim MacDonald. He was the recent president of the Royal Academy of Engineering. But again, when some of my colleagues say to me, what are you doing? What is this industry mentoring? What is CE4R? What is it you're actually doing? Why are you doing it? I say, well, look, the reports from the Royal Academy of Engineering over the last 2 decades have been telling us to do things like this. And they have been pointing to some best practice, perhaps at other universities throughout the UK, or in fact worldwide, and how best practice work integrated learning is being implemented. So we have a history of this over the last 2 decades, but it's quite piecemeal. It isn't, let's just say, too many of these initiatives are co-curricular rather than being curricular and part of the programme. They are like add-ons. And I think having done these initiatives for the last decade, I can see the most important thing is to make these things curricular so that all students have the opportunity to work in industry or to have industrial experience from industry. Okay, please move on. So just the last slide about the Royal Academy of Engineering and dog bites man. In UK journalism, it's said that journalists don't report on anything that's so normal that nobody would be interested. So dog bites man, not worth reporting. And I'm using that analogy here. If the man bites the dog, then that's different. That's worth reporting in the UK. So journalists tend not to report on anything that's quite normal. And this recent report from the IET, Institute of Engineering Technology, was saying just similar things to what was said 2 decades back by the Royal Academy of Engineering. Employers who engage with educators have the opportunity to shape the skills pipeline in the industry. And it's nothing new. We've known this for decades. So sometimes these reports kind of repeat themselves in a cycle, and it becomes quite fashionable. And for somebody picking up a report from 2024, oh my goodness, we must get sorted this, we must do this right now. And really, if they researched the topic, they'd find out that for the last 2 decades, we've been saying the same thing. So perhaps the issue at hand here is not knowing what we need to do, but actually kind of walking the talk. You know, we know we can talk the talk, we need to walk the talk and actually make these initiatives possible within higher education. Okay, let's move on. Just a reference to Strathclyde here. The university is the second university in Glasgow, and it was actually formed by a professor from Glasgow University who fell out with most of his colleagues, Professor John Anderson. And we have a building at Strathclyde called the John Anderson Building, typically. And he referred quite a lot to having an educational institution of useful learning. And he was kind of contrasting that with Glasgow University, you know, in the 19th century, where it was terribly scientific and terribly religious to some extent. And he said that Glasgow must have another university for the people, and it must be a university or an institution that kind of helps people find jobs and makes them employable. So John Anderson's view for a new university, which became Strathclyde in 1964, university status, was very much linked with local industry. And that's something that we're quite proud of, that not just my course in civil engineering, but many courses at Strathclyde are seeking to make the learning useful, making it practical. That doesn't distract from making it scientific. It doesn't distract from making it challenging to learn. But it does say that, you know, for the students, most students come to university to find a job at the end, and they want a job within that industry. You know, so working with industry to ensure that pipeline exists has been something that's in Strathclyde's blood. Okay, move on, please. Now, just referring to my own way of adopting things, I tend to work outside the curriculum or outside the programs. I teach management to engineers, and this allows me to work in many ways that it wouldn't had I been teaching a scientific topic such as hydraulics or geotechnics or structures, which tend to be based on a scientific body of knowledge. If I was teaching these topics, I'd be quite constrained about the body of knowledge I was conveying to students. But because I teach management to engineers, I can be quite flexible. And on the whole, nobody asks me what I'm doing. So I'm left alone to get up to mischief. So I kind of see the pedagogy that I employ as being a bit like punk or pirate or guerrilla, as an analogy. You know, I do things quite quietly behind the scenes. And 5 years later, somebody says to me, "What are you doing?" So hopefully it's in the best interest of students. Hopefully it's in the best interest of employers. And it seems to be that way. So just a way of working away and doing things sometimes without going through program approval. Okay, move on, please. So just starting with the industry mentoring, which is one of the aspects of the paper. That's an interesting photograph, in fact, because these are students from Brazil. And we had many students coming to the UK from Brazil during the mid-2000s. I think one of the education councils had a relationship between the UK and Brazil, and they came to us for about a year. And this was them visiting a new bridge project being built close to Edinburgh in Scotland. And one of the engineers clearly, you know, suggesting here's how the bridge has been put together. So it's quite a good photograph to kind of show what mentoring's about. Because our engineers construct and build projects, bridges, dams, motorways, buildings, lots of the work is outside clearly, but also some of the work is in design offices where they can work inside designing a project. And we tend to find that students pick their way into either construction, being outside, or design, being inside, designing the project. So the mentoring allows students to do that. And what happens is we get students into groups of 4 or 5. These are third-year students. They're allocated an industrial mentor. They're left to contact that mentor themselves. Sometimes that's a learning lesson about communication, a very important issue for them. How to work in a group, how to work in a team, how to nominate a leader of the team, how that leader should then contact the industry mentor. I've previously set up these mentors ready for contact. And because the scheme has been running now since 2010, many of the mentors are now senior engineers and recommend the mentoring to their younger graduate engineers. So once the program's set up, you get a cycle running and it supports itself. I actually have too many companies wanting to help. which is a good thing, you know. So 5, 6 years into a program like this, it starts to actually run itself almost. And I only have to deal with problems when they occur. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see a bit more about the mentoring. I did do an earlier paper on this. This was with industry. 3 engineers contributed to an earlier paper in 2015. So there is more information in that paper than the current one. But again, it emphasizes there from the pictures, you know, some of the students are out in industry and some are inside in design offices. And the bottom right photograph there, ARIP, it's quite old in fact, but ARIP have design offices around the world. And I'm sure there'll be an ARIP office not very far from you somewhere in your own country, because they are an international company who tend to be employed to do some of the most tricky projects in the world. Okay, so if you are looking for some more detailed information on this a bit earlier on, there's more information in that paper there. Okay, let's move on, please. So again, this is a fantastic photograph. It really brings down perhaps the kind of theoretical background to work integrated learning, and a couple of papers I've read in the past were about possible selves and anticipatory socialization, and these theoretical constructs were the idea that we're always constructing our future selves, whether it be in academia, whether it be in life, whether it be in the family. You know, every part of living is constructing your future self, and particularly in higher education, we're always doing that through the degree, through co-curricular studies, and perhaps meeting role models, perhaps meeting mentors, allows students to visualize what they'll be like in the future. I think LinkedIn's a very good example of that. You know, when you look at LinkedIn and you see a graduate's profile going from graduating to engineer to senior engineer to senior manager over, say, a 20-year period. So I always suggest to the students that using LinkedIn is quite useful to see role models. So one of the things we're hoping that the mentors do is become role models to the students. And the reason I like that picture is that, you know, they're looking out to the estuary, they're looking out to a bridge that's to be completed, and perhaps imagining themselves completing that bridge in the future. So Broadbent and McCann have a fantastic report on this, and again, they emphasize this bit about the mentor creating the heart and soul of education, and that convincing the students it's not just about the grades. And this is an ongoing problem we have in most students, I think, probably worldwide, is they focus on the whole experience of university and not just wonder what's in the next exam, and not just to rote learn, and to actually experience everything and to consider and be reflective. So the students do write a reflective report from the mentoring, but again, that's a challenge. I think asking any university student to be reflective and then to write reflective is quite a challenge. And for engineers in particular, that can be very challenging because they're normally looking for a computational solution that involves numbers to get things right. They assume that there's one right answer. Whereas asking them to be reflective, to think about how they learned is quite challenging. But overall, they do a reasonable job, and some of the submissions they hand in for the coursework are in fact very, very good. Often they'll speak to their parents or they'll speak to a sibling who perhaps works in veterinary or nursing or medicine, and they're much more used to writing reflective reports, and they get guidance from that. Okay, let's move on. So this is a fantastic photograph because this is an engineer standing up here from American Bridge, and he came over from the USA to work on a bridge project. In fact, the previous slide photograph. And this was him holding a CU for our workshop. So moving on from the mentoring to civil engineering for real here. These are evening workshops on a Monday night from 5 to 7 p.m. So these are co-curricular. They're not assessed. I know some of the definitions of co-curricular suggest that it has to be assessed. I think there's varying definitions of co-curricular. I'm certainly not assessing this, but the students are writing some feedback from this. So these are students from years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 allocated to a group. The engineer will bring a problem in. They will dispense the problem for 20 minutes, and then the students will work in the groups trying to solve the problem. If they bring in 2 or 3 engineers, they can go round the tables, and this is when the students get an opportunity to ask the engineer about simple things, perhaps about their salary, perhaps about how they got their job, or perhaps something to do with the technical solution to the problem. So we've found this again has been a fantastic pipeline for engineers. You know, they'll look at the group, they'll look to see if there's a student who has perhaps emotional empathy, who's helping another student along. So some of the 4th or 5th year students hopefully are presenting themselves as role models for the 1st and 2nd year students. And I've seen that happen. You know, some of the 4th or 5th year students who've been in industry will be taking notes in a notepad. And the 1st year student will look at that and say, well, why are you doing that? And say, well, this is what you do as an engineer, you know. So they're learning about skills, learning about attributes by watching each other. So having years from across the curriculum working together is fantastic. And as I said earlier, sometimes we have MSc students in this workshop too. So again, that's been running since 2012. It supports itself now. Too many employers want to help. And I just finished number 6 on Monday evening this week with Scottish Water, who are the organisation responsible for supplying water to homes in Scotland and businesses and taking sewage away. So we had a fantastic workshop on Monday night with 4 engineers, 2 of them alumni, you know, which really made a hit with the students, understanding where they could get a job eventually and what kind of job they would do. So if we move on to the next slide at it, you'll see where this idea came from. It's a bit shocking to some extent, and I know when I published the first paper on this, that the referees weren't quite keen on mentioning this, but it does involve self-harm, not my own self-harm, but someone else's. And I woke up in 2012, early in the morning from bed at home here, wondering how I could get the students more involved with industry and using industry problems for them to solve. And I was thinking about, there's a rock band from Wales in the UK called the Manic Street Preachers. And one of their members was disappointed being interviewed by the BBC journalist on TV. And he didn't think the journalist was taking him seriously. So he went behind a curtain and he disfigured his arm by carving 4 real, number 4, then real into his arm as 4 real. I am 4 real, he said, you know. So the story to how it ended up as civil engineering for real comes from that. It came from me waking up in the morning and thinking this. And when I put that into the paper for the journal, the referees weren't keen at all in that going into the paper, particularly given it's an engineering journal. But I had to say to them, look, this is how I thought about the concept. This is where the concept came. I woke up early with an epiphany. I didn't intend to do that. It just happened. I'm sure you'll have your own experience sometimes thinking about coursework or exams or just general work, and you wake up early worrying about something or ruminating about something. And that's how the idea came about. So it's perhaps the only engineering journal that mentions a rock band from Wales. It stayed in. So that's where the title came from. Okay, let's move on. So the paper I mentioned there is in the European Journal of Engineering Education. And that again goes into a bit more detail about civil engineering for real. But the crux of the issue here is that they bring in real industrial problems and they bring in real documents such as plans and schedules and drawings and client briefs. Sometimes they have to anonymize these things because obviously it's a current project they're working on, or it's a recent past project, or perhaps it's a controversial project such as a wind turbine close to housing or something, you know. But the idea is that the real documents and the real materials allow the students to feel like they're an engineer. So in many ways, it's simulated. They're not in industry. They're working on industrial problems within the university setting. So you can only suggest that these things are simulated, but they're using real documents. The analysis and synthesis that the students go through is again something quite challenging because they're usually looking for the correct answer. They start to learn that engineers might have several answers to the problem and that they might be contextualized by restrictions. It could be financial issues, it could be health and safety issues, it could be environmental issues. So the students start to learn that having the right technical answers, fine, but there are restrictions on what you eventually do. And that's a great learning lesson for them to take back into their modules that they study during the day. So I frequently find feedback from this initiative that says, my goodness, that's what we were studying last week in class, or that's what I studied last week. Now I understand why we're doing this. Or something, oh, I understand we're doing water in 3rd year. The workshop from Monday night with Scottish Water will help me understand that next year. So we did try and link some of these workshops to modules during the day, and it didn't quite work. And the reason it didn't work is we didn't have the ability to make sure we had first, second, third, fourth, and fifth year students mingling together. So, putting this within the program is possible, but not without major challenges. And there are universities who have done something similar to this, and they call it VIP, Vertical Integrated Projects. I think that's an international initiative now. So it is possible, but not without its challenges. Okay, let's move on. So I've referred to that there previously, the vertical integration. Again, this is something that Broadbent and McCann in their report referred to. Here's how to solve the problem. If you haven't got students going out into industry for placements, or you haven't got sandwich courses running, here's how to do it. Create this vertical integration with students from different years working together. Bring in experts from industry. Build trust to support peer-to-peer learning. This is one of the major challenges in engineers. Because they sit exams, and they'll be sitting exams in December soon, typically exam format and quietly for 2 hours working on a problem, no plagiarism, no cheating, they become very competitive. And that competition stays with them through the 5 years of their course. And what they don't realize is that competition in industry is between companies, but within the company, they're going to be collaborative and cooperative. So this helps them understand the skills and attributes necessary to be collaborative and cooperative. They don't always trust each other. So that's an interesting issue, do I trust you as a first year student to help me learn about this? So trust is a really big issue, not only in engineering industry, but certainly in education, because we have very competitive environments where students compete against each other to get a first class degree, to get a 2-1, to get a 2-2, to get a third class, and this sets up this competition. So this is the opposite of that. It's trying to be collaborative and cooperative, and to instill these skills and attributes within the students. Okay, move on. So going back to the theory of work integrated learning, this is a table. It's from the paper that was just published, and what I did is I did research obviously on WIL, and I found a fantastic book and a chapter on that, and used their definitions of work integrated learning down the left hand side here, and then I tried to match those with the industry mentoring and CE4R. The one thing that these authors did stipulate was that if it was co-curricular, it was assessed. And again, I've said that in the CE4R classification here, that CE4R isn't assessed. Industry mentoring is. It's curricular. It's part of a third year class. The students write a reflective report. They produce a CV and a cover letter for their mentors, and that's assessed by the mentors. CE4R isn't assessed. It's co-curricular, but not assessed. It's voluntary. So I stipulate that here. So it doesn't quite fit completely into the definition of WIL by these authors, but nonetheless, it's very close. And I think you'll see that within the paper, some of the actual feedback from the students. Okay, let's move on. The main benefit for both industry mentoring and CE4 is the talent pipeline. And I have, so many emails from students or graduates or employees now saying, this is how I found my job. The certificate from the course got me the interview, but being able to talk about the mentoring, being able to talk about the CE4R at the job interview sealed it for me, And I was sitting next to other students from Heriot Watt or from Glasgow or from Dundee University who don't do these things. And this made it much more attractive to the employer. So, the talent pipeline is something that's the major benefit. That's the win-win bit. The employees get the students that they'd like for a graduate. We get the help. And different from the research agenda, there's no money exchanged. It's goodwill and it's relationships built up. We move on, please, at it. Can you just excuse me for 2 seconds for a little comfort break? 2 seconds. Okay, thank you for your time there. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is indicating another benefit for the employers, which is corporate social responsibility or social impact. So most engineering companies now civils who build a school, build a hospital, build a motorway or a dam, they will try and employ local people. They will try and have school visits from school pupils and universities. And this kind of fits with the requirements for corporate social responsibility and more recently creating social value and social impact. So I had a site visit with students last Friday in Glasgow to a prison project. We have a Victorian prison in Glasgow called Barlinnie, and they're building a new prison. It's costing lots of money. And the contractor building that prison intends to try and retrain about 30 prisoners to come out and work in the construction industry, as bricklayers, carpenters, steel fixers. So part of the social value requirement for the contract is to retrain some of the prisoners who are actually in the prison to be useful to society as construction workers. Other parts of that will be coming to do a C4R, having a site visit from the students, having student mentors and mentees. And some of the companies therefore advertise that on their webpage that they're engaged in this. So as well as a talent pipeline for the employers, it allows them to demonstrate their corporate social responsibility and creating social impact for a local university. So again, that's another plus, and that takes 5 or 6 years to build up. And once it's running, it's fine. It supports itself. Typically, the students might go on LinkedIn the following evening to a C4R and put something on. So again, that's another way of broadcasting what you do to more people. And it certainly works. When students go and say, I participated in C4R on Monday night with Scottish Water, and here's what I did, it broadcasts the initiatives much further afield. And you find that academics from other universities become inquisitive, and employers who haven't engaged become inquisitive. So it's a fantastic way of broadcasting things, whether it be on the company's web pages or socials, or the students using LinkedIn to do that themselves. Okay, let's move on. Some of the other topics I'm just going to mention on the slides here are additional that perhaps couldn't be described as work integrated learning because they're too infrequent perhaps, or not in sufficient depth. And what we have done for the last 20 odd years is visits to construction projects. I mentioned a visit last Friday to a new prison project. These photographs here, one's a new hospital in Glasgow, and the second one's the bridge across the Firth of Forth near Edinburgh. So one thing we do quite often is take the students out to visits, but these are roughly about an hour at a time, an hour and a half at a time. The students are really participant observers. They're observing what's going on. They can also smell what's going on a construction site often. So they listen, they smell, they hear, and they ask questions. So it's not quite work integrated learning, but it is contact with industry. So this allows them to go out and see what engineers do in practice again for a short period in time. So that's something else that we do that perhaps a softer version of work integrated learning perhaps wouldn't fit into the definition too tightly. Okay, next slide, please. Another thing that we do with the students is because it's engineers, we build things, but unlike mechanical engineers or aeronautical engineers or product engineers, we build things outdoors. We build the things in the environment. And the photograph there with the tower behind the students, that's meant to be a replication of the Barcelona tower. In Barcelona, there's a large communication tower on the hill behind the city, and this is a scaled down version of it. So that the students actually do practical work. That they use wheelbarrows, they use shovels, they put the steel in and they put the concrete in. All the things they won't do as a graduate engineer, but they'll learn about health and safety. They learn about project management. They learn about leadership. They learn about, again, empathy and helping each other. So this is a bit closer to work integrated learning, but it's certainly simulated. It's a scaled down version. They spend 5 days building this on site. And at the end of the 5 days, they're usually quite tired because they're used to sitting down listening to lectures all day, So working on site in the fresh air, in different weather, sometimes universities do this in March and it snows. We often do this in the summertime, it's very warm. So the students learn an awful lot from that. And typically the contractor helping us with that will be looking at some of the students as prospective employees, prospective summer placement students. And they're looking particularly for students who help each other. And again, this is a learning lesson for lots of the students who are very academic and see themselves being quite competitive, that they go off and become the leader of the group, but they're actually not leading anyone. There's no followers. And obviously to the engineers, they're looking for people who are team players. You know, will you work in a team? Will you support each other? Will you help the team develop? So it's a fantastic learning lesson for some students about how not to be competitive and to be collaborative again. Okay, so we do that annually since 2010, and most civil engineering departments in the UK now tend to do this. It's also done in England, at Bircham Newton in England. Okay, move on, please. The other thing I've done in the past is a kind of Trojan horse initiative where I've kind of sneaked students into design offices, and I call it the Trojan horse initiative because we kind of make out we're coming to do a book reading. We tend to find a book that a consultant's written, or a book that's been written about a project linked to the consultancy, and we ask some of the students to go and read the book to the engineers, and it gives them skills in presenting to senior engineers, and they're quite fearful for doing that, clearly. You know, for young students at 18, 19, 20, standing up and presenting not only to their peers, but presenting to engineers in practice is quite daunting. And mostly the students who take this on, the top photograph there with the lady in ginger hair there, she had public speaking confidence from school, you know. But it's a good lesson again for the other students to watch that and to learn how to speak in a public domain and to learn about these professional skills, something that will be important to them as engineers. Again, it's something that a lot of the civil engineering students don't understand, that, you know, by the time they're into industry, they'll have to talk to clients, they'll have to talk to the public, they'll have to talk to peers, and they can't lock themselves in a little room and be competitive anymore. So helping them develop these skills is useful. So again, that's another soft example of work integrated learning. It's a dip in, dip out. Here's what's happening in these design offices. Okay, move on, please. We're getting close to the end here. So an important issue here I've mentioned already is alumni. And it's a fantastic little quote here from a book that I found about using alumni to help your university. And this analogy given here is about the alumni being bumblebees that go away and get honey, and then they bring that honey back to university to share with people, to nourish and nurture. I think it's a fantastic analogy of the bumblebee coming back with all this honey and nurturing people. And that's exactly what the alumni do. So most of the people who help with the mentoring, most of the people who help with the CE4R tend to be former graduates. Not always, but most of them are. And in that way, what you're doing is treating your current students like future alumni. If we work with the current first, second, third, fourth, and fifth year students, they will become our alumni. So it's important to introduce them to that way of thinking when they come in first year. The joint board of moderators who are coming to accredit us next week or 2 weeks' time, they believe that the student becomes a civil engineer on day one. Day one at university, they're no longer a school pupil. They're no longer a student. They become a civil engineer. I think that's easier in other disciplines sometimes. You know, the chemical engineers maybe put a white jacket on and go into the workshops or the laboratories, and there's a symbolic symbol there about putting something on. Perhaps when our civil engineers go out to industry and they put their hard hat on and their high-vis jacket for safety, there's a symbolic introduction there to the industry. So symbolism is quite important, I think. You know, made me think of artificial intelligence there, but that's going to take me on a completely different route of thought. But so I'll avoid that this time. But using your current students and thinking about them as future alumni is the way to develop these initiatives. Okay, move on, please. Mentioned reflective practice, and we're very grateful that the Institution of Civil Engineers in the UK has developed a forum for students to use. When the students graduate, they'll go through a period to become chartered, and we call that Initial Professional Development, IPD. The university now recognises we can do that whilst the students are learning. So the CE4R that's co-curricular can be used to complete this forum. The students reflect on the technical knowledge they've learned, the health and safety, the environmental knowledge, and they can document that knowledge in this IPD form for students. And if they have that linked to their CV and take that along to a job interview, for a summer placement or a graduate job. Most employers are kind of just blown away by this. They can't believe that students are doing this. So we're really trying to encourage the students to use this forum for the site visits, for the constructionarium, for the C4R, and document their learning taking place additional to their studies, and then link that to their CV. So we're very grateful that the IC have developed this forum for students. It is a challenge to get students to use it, but the ones who see the benefit from it immediately can see that. And obviously employers who see that, recognize the importance of that and see the student as being someone who's curious, who's interested in the industry. So we're trying to push that quite a lot. Okay, I think we're getting close to the last slide here. Just really some reading on work integrated learning, particularly the book on this on the right hand side. For engineers, more reports on how to work with industry. And the central one here, a higher education report on employability and work integrated learning. There's no shortage of information on this topic, whatever discipline you're involved in. And certainly when I see the Australian academics, there's lots and lots of research from Australia on work integrated learning. So perhaps they're a bit further ahead than we are in the UK on this topic, or perhaps you are yourselves in your part of the world on this. Perhaps there's different challenges in different parts of the world regarding employers and employees, and perhaps that might differ due to the discipline that you're in. It might be more challenging depending which discipline that you're in. Engineering is a very, very vocational industry, so it's quite natural and quite easy to work with industry. And I think the last slide at it just had some references down there, should the students wish to go and do a bit more reading. It's specific to engineering, of course, but they're there for future consultation should that be required. So I did promise not to speak for more than about 40 minutes. I think that's been about 40 minutes. And I hopefully that's introduced you to a couple of the initiatives that I've started at Strathclyde, and hopefully would like to see other institutions benchmark and take forward. It doesn't have to be engineering, it can be other industries. So we're now open for some discussion, some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before the discussion begin, I have a question, Dr. Murray. On slide 20, it is specified that a byproduct is that our graduate engineers pick up CPD credit. What is CPD credits?
Okay, so CPD is continual professional development, and it's very closely linked to initial professional development. CPD can be done by any industry and can be done by any person, and really it's about professionals documenting their continual learning. And I often refer to the students about a GP, a general practitioner doctor that I used to meet at the gym, and he would sit on the bicycle and he would read research papers from the Lancet Journal, from the British Medical Journal, and he was sitting on his bike for an hour with a bunch of papers, and he was reading these and marking them, and he'd throw them down beside him. And after an hour, he'd read about 5 or 6 papers. So he was doing his continual professional development at the gym. He was keeping up with current medical knowledge, so that if he had a patient came in with something unusual, he would know what that was. And I use that analogy with the students about structural engineering. If they're designing something and there's been a collapse of a bridge or a building somewhere, and there's been a research paper written on it, and they then go and design a project very similar without knowing about this, then they've got a professional responsibility, an ethical responsibility, to be up to date with the current knowledge. So the students kind of think they stop learning when they graduate. In reality, of course, they start learning when they graduate. And they have to document their continual professional development to become chartered. A lot of people, once they become chartered, kind of stop doing it, but the professional institutions would like them to continue. So what Balfour Beatty were saying here is, because our graduate engineers are helping the students' mentees, they can then use that as an example on their CPD towards becoming chartered.
I see. Thank you. Okay, student, do you have anything to ask or would like to discuss with Professor Murray? Please.
This is always a challenging bit. It's for any student to be asking questions or discussion. But can I ask what disciplines that the students are in? What are you studying yourselves?
Nan, would you like to be the first one? Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Nan. Actually, I'm originally from Myanmar. Okay, currently I just live in the SUT University campus, like for the studying. Yeah,
And what course are you studying?
cooperative educations.
Okay, okay. So
Yes.
where does that, what job does that take you into when you graduate?
For me, after graduation, I'm planning like to work just in the education sector,
Okay,
especially
okay,
education for the youth.
okay, okay. That's fantastic. So the course is kind of streamlined specifically for graduates to go back into academia.
Okay, actually, I have one question. Okay, I have one question because like in the slide I saw like the alumni, which is related to that. I would like to ask one question. I see that alumni, they are the key external connections, like for the university or something. So, if possible, I would like you to share with us how did you maintain the alumni network, like in your university, or maybe what strategy are you using, like to maintain the alumni connections or something? Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's a very good question, Nan, because obviously the university as a whole have a list of the alumni that have studied at Strathclyde for many years. And at graduation ceremonies, the vice chancellor or whoever's doing the graduations always refers to this to students. You know, you've now graduated, you're part of the Strathclyde community, and he always mentions the number of Strathclyders who have graduated, and it's into the 20, 30. Well, it's a lot. So they're seen as alumni. I think too often universities see these as potential funders. We were very lucky to get a donation of 50 million recently from somebody from your part of the world who was involved in the COVID manufacturing process. And they had studied at Strathclyde in the business school, I think 20 odd year ago, and decided to donate £50 million to Strathclyde, which was very, very, very nice. So we're about to refurbish a new building with that money in his name. And I think too often perhaps universities look at former alumni as potential financial donors. I think that's part of the problem. In fact, it does happen sometimes. But if you come under the radar of that and see the alumni as people who can help students, and there's no money exchanged here, and it's a win-win, it's a win-win for everybody, then that's the way to do it. So I could access a university network of alumni going right back 30, 40 years. And it usually has the employer. Obviously, there's an issue there with Data Protection Act on who can access that data, who has rights to use that data, given the GDPR regulations in the UK. So I tend to have built up my network over the last 27 years at Strathclyde. I've been at Strathclyde 27 years in January. I've built that up through knowing students when they graduate, knowing where they go as employees, starting initiative off, and then it just builds as a cycle. So I have my own data bank of people who have helped. What I get excited about now, I get really excited about, is finding new companies who haven't taken part already. And sometimes I've got to push out a company that I've used many times before to bring a new company in. And the company who's been with us for many years gets a bit, oh, what have you done? I want to bring a new company in who it's a new name for the students. So we had a company 2 Mondays ago for CE4R called Macaferri, and they're an Italian company. And this company makes these what they call gabion baskets. They're baskets full of stone that they put to support walls and support soil around about motorways and buildings. And that was the first time in 14 years we'd used Macaferri, which is quite useful because we have a number of colleagues from Italy, you know. So I've now built up that relationship with the company. They enjoyed what they did. The students enjoyed it. I'll keep them in my database, and hopefully I'll use them again soon. So once you get this thing running for 5 years, it kind of builds itself. It builds its own network. But to start with, you probably need to use the university's data bank of alumni to build that first initiative up. You know. So you guys could then go to work. You when you come back to academia, you could go to any faculty, any discipline. You don't kind of. It could be the business school, and I take it in the business school, we have a very successful MBA at Strathclyde who works with industry. I take it the business school have lots of contacts with industries, particularly through the MBA type courses. I suppose typically if you got allocated to a department of history or geography, it might be more challenging to find work integrated learning and employers. I'm just kind of surmising here about that one, but I know that the standard joke in the UK about a geography graduate is what do you ask a geography graduate? And it's like, do you want 2 Big Macs or 3 Big Macs? Because they're going to end up working at McDonald's. So we know there's certain disciplines that aren't really connected from university to industry. So maybe that's a real challenge. If you get allocated into a department that has these disciplines, that'll be a significant challenge to implement work integrated learning. But maybe the challenge is a good challenge.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Murray.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ek Balang, do you have anything to share? Would you like to talk about your past degree before you enroll in this program?
Guy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. First of all, because adventure is winning. The win is quite. So make internet is not unstable. I will try to communicate with you. Okay. I would like to introduce myself first. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Professor Murray, Dr. Atit, and Dr. Sumitra. Puthakun Ek Balang. I'm a technical staff, academic staff at Vocational Education Division under Ministry of Education and Sport, Lao PDR. I mean, I'm a government staff. I working at education field as well. Not exactly teacher, but educator working at administration work at the office. Like I introduce myself, I'm not really in engineering fields, so but co-op learning. I can pick some idea or almost of idea to co-curriculum to use in a co-op program in Laos at the future. At the first time, think about E for real, what that means, but after your lecture, I understand a bit. I will try to read more and try to more about what is exactly of not for me, just not much, just only this for today. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
I think the one word that you mentioned is very interesting is the word vocational, because I think in through the last 5-6 decades in the UK, vocational was always things like a car mechanic, a hairdresser, a butcher, somebody that worked with their hands. And I think university status almost suggested that the motor skills with your hands were less important than using the brain, cognitive skills. And I think, the employability agenda has shown that employers want both. They want students who have tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge and can work with their head and their hands. Maybe not physically, but certainly understanding that, university knowledge is a foundation to build on. And to call a discipline vocational, to call a science vocational would be seen sometimes as, if you're a chemist or a physicist, they might be upset to call the discipline vocational. But probably what they don't realise is most of the students who have paid money to study want a job at the end of it. So in many ways, all courses are vocational. Students don't go to university anymore for the fun or for the privilege of just learning the knowledge, because they have economic necessities to get a job at the end of the course. And I think that's really made the whole aspect much quicker. Employability has become quicker in higher education because of that. Students want a job at the end of it. So I think some disciplines like science, perhaps, and maybe medicine. Medicine is a vocational industry. They become doctors and surgeons, but I have colleagues who get upset if I call civil engineering vocational, and to me that's strange. So I think that's a very good, it's an evocative word that linked to work integrated learning is so important, but has such context within higher education. It's a good word to upset people sometimes. So thank you for your contribution, and I hope your work in Laos goes well.
Pantawong, do you have anything to share?
Somebody? Yes, of course. I have some.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Jan. Yes, may I introduce myself? My name is Chanthik Pantawong. I'm from Laos. Now I am working as a tourism promoter at the Department of Information, Culture and Tourism in Vientiane province. It's it's not far from Vientiane capital. It's around 70 kilometers. And now, why I interested to study cooperative education? Because I have been working as a education or teaching French at the Department of French, the National University of Laos for more than 20 years. So I'm interested to do my research in cooperative education. Yes, as I listen to this for today, yes, I'm happy to attend the class today. Nevertheless, if I don't have knowledge about civil engineering, so that is interesting to listen today.
Okay. You mentioned that you're involved in tourism.
Yes. My fear is tourism. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if I cannot, if I can do my research in tourism in this field or.
Well, I know that Laos is a country I know not too much about, but I know it's become very popular, as has Vietnam and Cambodia in the past 20 years for visitors, but particularly what you might call adventure tourism. People who want to see bits of the country that perhaps you wouldn't want them to see, but they want to see. So adventure tourism has become very popular, hasn't it? And nature tourism has become very popular in countries such as your own as well. Protecting the flora and fauna, protecting the wildlife in countries around the world has become popular as a tourist attraction. So, there must be employers within your own country and employers external to Laos that organise visits to the country and trips to the country. And I suppose that presents opportunities to engage with those employers, and to perhaps not have them in physically, but to have workshops online. I mean, I would say that during COVID, for the 2 years, we ran both the mentoring and C4R online. We did the workshops on Zoom on a Monday night for 2 hours, and it worked fantastically because it allowed us to use engineers who were in London, who were in Aberdeen, because there was no physical distance required. We were online. So, you know, perhaps there's European companies in tourism that organise visits to Laos, to Cambodia, to Vietnam, that could engage in work integrated learning without having to visit the country. You know, so using Teams, using Zoom.
Pantawong, now you are in Laos, right?
Yes, I'm in Laos now. In Laos, yes, of course. Like Putakun.
Okay.
Oh,
Pan, do you have any? Yes, please.
There's the advantage of Teams and Zoom. We're in different time zones, we're in different climates, we're in different cultures, but it's allowing us to communicate. We should do it so much more with international universities.
I agree. Pan, do you have anything to discuss or share? Oh, okay. Dr. Sumita, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Abid, thank you very much. Dr. Murray, I saw the presentation and I saw one of the activity that you shared to us that the public speaking that you asked the student to share to try to practice about the public speaking. That is very important, including Thai student as well, that they lack of this skill a lot, not just only for the engineering student, but other field of the student because I don't take that for all, but I would say that Thai student afraid to say in the public area, not just only in English language, but even in Thai, they're afraid that they're not confident when they would like to speak in the public area. And I have an opportunity to teach them how to communicate, how to present in the public area well. I think this is very important skill that we have to train our students to practice before they go to the workplace and when they're back from the workplace as well that they have to present about the project and in the future when they go to work in the real work that they have to present about their work. I think this is quite important, not just only for in English and Thai language as well. And I got some technique from you and I may adapt to my class as well. Thank you very much.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, as I say, I've been Strathclyde 27 years in January, and in the last decade with information technology and students with phones, it certainly has become more challenging because they become more into themselves with their phone and their, you know, and they read less, so that's a challenge. They're competitive, so everything about making them cooperative and collaborative and to talk to each other, it's a gentle start, making it happen in the groups first, making it happen there first. It gives them a bit of confidence, and then perhaps they can have confidence to stand up and talk. But they'll have to do it as engineers, they'll have to do it as scientists, they'll have to do it in business. So, you know, it's one of these skills that we know it's important, and we just try and do our best at inculcating it, you know. We try our best.
Yes, and sometimes I found that the new generation, the young generation, not just only the present in the public area, even they talk to each other and talk to others, the communication is not properly. So we have to train them to communicate with others in proper way.
I do worry that artificial intelligence, chat GPT, etc., will take over, and they'll use a hybrid person or personality to do this for them, and that might be very normal in 50 years' time. You know, I know on the radio yesterday morning, David Attenborough is one of the UK's most respected naturalists, scientists about nature programs around the world, and someone's taken his voice and have cloned his voice and have used that in America to report on the war in Russia. and it's his voice they've used. They've cloned his voice, you know. So we can see these things happening now, and how these things will embed themselves in higher education is quite frightening at the moment. But I suppose I'm about to retire in the next 5 or 6 years. I can escape this, but for younger academics, we'll need to adopt and adapt ourselves to, you know, this technology that's coming our way, you know. And that might mean the curriculum has to change. It might mean exams have to change. It might mean the whole concept of learning has to change. So that can be exciting and also quite fearful.
Okay. Anything else? None, please.
Can I ask one more question, please? Yes. Like in here, especially, I would like to ask one question, which is more related to the gender. Like, because in engineering, mostly, especially in Asia, like the engineer are male, not female. You know, sometimes even some engineer students in Myanmar, like they face the problem, like when they apply the jobs, because they are female, like the employer, they don't prioritize women. So we can say that the gender discriminations are still remaining in Asia, especially in Myanmar. I'm not sure for the other country, but how about in Scotland? Like when you send the female student, like engineer students, like to the workplace, did they face any gender discriminations or something? Or if you have some experience, you can share with us. I think.
Yeah. I mean, it has been a problem in the past. I think most employers now in the UK, most big employers, any industry, have diversity documentation. They have ethical standards that are linked to diversity. So that's regarding you know, gender, regarding sexual orientation. You know, I mean, it might be a huge issue in some countries. Let's take Saudi Arabia, for example, to declare yourself as homosexual and be employed. You know, so most UK companies, most European companies tend to have diversity policies. The university has a diversity policy. This has only really happened in the last decade, and it's still developing. It's still moving forward. That's not to say that individual people and individual companies don't have different opinions, you know, and that students therefore meet somebody with that opinion. I know that happened in the past. One of the students' reports from the mentoring about a decade ago, she said that she was on a construction site and one of the workers shouted to her. He said to her, "When you come back the next time, bring some sweeties with you." And she was offended by that. And she wrote in her report, "I've been handling horses since I was a young child. I have a horse. And if I can handle horses, I can handle that man." And I was so happy to be reading this. And as I was grading her, I was smiling. I could hear her saying this to me, you know. And maybe in some ways she was developing resilience, having to confront that comment. She developed resilience to combat it. And I think it's a very important issue you're raising here, and it'll be different in different cultures, clearly, in what's seemed to be acceptable in society. All I can say in the UK is, but we've progressed quite well in the last decade. We're moving forward. The current theme seems to be neurodiversity as well, neurological diversity. People who have ADHD, who have Asperger's syndrome. And we're now seeing employers say, we want these candidates. We want people to declare, because we see these people as having creative minds. So we're now starting to see employers in the UK actually target people with these kind of neurological, what in the past would be called defects, but people are no longer seeing these as defective. They're seeing these as a positive attribute that can help an employer be creative. So the diversity umbrella is now very large in the UK. And on the whole, we're progressing, we're getting better, but we're not there yet, you know, but we're getting better.
So would you like to give any suggestions, like how can we raise the awareness to the employer or the partnership with our university or something, which is related to the gender equality or something?
I think it has to be done through a statement of ethics. You know, the universities also have a statement about, say, plagiarism and cheating, and you know that students who cheat or can go straight to the vice chancellor. They can be put out of university studies. I think we at Strathclyde, I haven't looked at it recently, but I know for example, there's going to be a network of workshops quite soon on decolonizing the curriculum. You know, in the UK, we had an empire. I understand it was bigger than the Roman Empire. You know, we've left countries in a state. We created wars during the empire, and a lot of people dispensed the knowledge about the curriculum through a very white Western view. And the decolonizing the curriculum seeks to place the agenda back in a global sense, so that if you have, let's say, African students in your class, that you allow them the opportunity to reconstruct the knowledge they're getting through a different lens. You know, so we're starting to challenge these things, and you know, decolonizing the curriculum is one of these issues. You know, if we look at the way that the British went to Australia, and the Aborigines were punished, you know, and seen as inferior citizens, and it's taken 150 years for them to now be accepted as the rightful owners of Australia. You know, so if you're teaching engineering in Australia, I know of one academic is a good example. In fact, very good question, good example is Martin Loosemore, who thinks at Victoria University in the States, in Australia. One of his PhD researchers went to live with Indigenous Aborigines for about a year to write his PhD in an ethnographic research. And it was mainly about a road that was going to be built through sacred land. So his whole PhD was built on the Aboriginal Indians' understanding of why, you know, white men want to build a road through sacred land. So it's a very good example of, you know, years ago, we just built the road. It wouldn't have mattered what they thought. Whereas now, we've actually now got people researching this, why it matters. We shouldn't need to research it, of course, but maybe we have to get to a stage where we understand different cultures, different understandings first, and document it, you know. So I would look first at university policy and strategy and policy documents, and you have to come down from the top first to change values and culture.
Okay, thank you for your suggestions and also your answers. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay, I think the time is up. So thank you so much, Dr. Murray, for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences with us today. In my opinion, CE4R is an inspiring example of how students can remain within the university setting while engaging with real-world industry. It not only helps them develop practical skills, but also fosters critical abilities like analysis and synthesis, which are essential for their future careers. Student, this best practice of Dr. Murray reminds us that will can take many forms beyond traditional workplace placement like CV. So this is a very good example. On behalf of everyone, I would like to express my gratitude for Dr. Murray's time and for providing just a thoughtful and engaging session. Your passion for bridging academic and industry is fully motivating. Thank you once again, Dr. Murray. ขอบคุณครับ
Well, thank you for the invite, and it was a delight to engage with you all, and I sincerely wish we can do things like this in the future with many more people.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Have a lovely evening. I'm going to go in the sun now and walk my dog. Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye bye. ขอบคุณ
Thank you.
ครับ
Thank you.
Thank you.